Gabriel never believed in omens, but that morning the silence felt strange. There was a stillness in the house, as if even the walls were holding their breath. The soft hum of the air conditioner, the distant ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway, the muted clinks of cutlery downstairs where breakfast was being ignored. It all felt wrong. His hoodie was already on, though he hadn't planned on going anywhere. He sat at the edge of his bed, one shoe on, one shoe off, as if even his body didn't know what it was preparing for. He didn't want to go. His mother, Gabriel, had knocked gently on his door an hour ago to tell him his father was waiting downstairs. "Just a quick ride," she said. "He needs you to come." But why? Why today, of all days, did his father suddenly need him to come along? Eric hadn't asked questions. He just muttered a vague, "okay," and got dressed, but his gut twisted as he tied his laces. Something about today wasn't right. His chest felt tight, his throat dry. It was like his instincts had wrapped themselves around his ribs, whispering, "Don't go." Downstairs, his father was already tapping his car key against his palm. "Let's not waste the day," Gabriel said, with a pointed glance at his watch. He looked sharp in his tailored blazer and cologne that clung to the air like it had a purpose of its own. Eric hesitated at the door, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Where are we going?" he asked flatly. "Downtown, just a stop," Kennedy replied. "You'll be back before lunch." Eric wanted to say no. Every cell in his body screamed it, but he bit his tongue, gave a nod, and climbed into the passenger seat of the car. The ride started quiet, except for the low hum of the jazz station his father always played when he wanted to pretend they were closer than they really were. It didn't take long before Eric noticed his father wasn't headed toward the bank or any place familiar. "This isn't downtown," he said quietly. Kennedy didn't answer immediately. Then came the calm lie. "Quick detour." Eric turned his face toward the window. He didn't need confirmation. He already knew. His father wasn't running errands. He was heading to her, the side chick, the woman who laughed at all his dad's jokes and wore lipstick brighter than his mom ever did. Eric had seen the messages. The midnight calls. He'd heard the tone his father used on the phone, the voice that softened like he was someone else entirely. Kennedy had been cheating on Sandra for over a year. And yet, she stayed. Maybe she didn't know the full truth, or maybe she did and simply loved him through the silence. Eric hated it. Hated that his mother's loyalty was being stained behind her back. Hated that he had to be part of the lie. Hated that he was in this car, sitting beside a man who lived two lives and wore his guilt like it was a designer coat. He should have said no. He should have stayed home. The rain came fast. Soft at first, like fingers tapping gently on the windshield, then harder. It fell in sheets, blurring the world into grey streaks of motion and light. Kennedy barely slowed down. His phone buzzed once. He picked it up, answered it, voice dropping low into that hushed, secret tone. Eric turned to him, anger bubbling under the surface. "You're really doing this? Right now?" Kennedy glanced at him, annoyed. "Mind your business." That was the last thing Eric remembered clearly. The road slick with rain, the flash of headlights, the scream of tires skidding across soaked asphalt, the sharp twist of metal meeting metal, and the weightless, horrible moment where the car left the road, flipped once, twice, and the world spun into chaos. Everything after that came in pieces. The world went quiet, then loud, then pain, then nothing. When he opened his eyes, he expected white lights, the kind you see in hospital ceilings, the kind that tells you made it. But all he saw was black. He blinked, still black. He moved his hand toward his face. Nothing. His mind screamed, "Where am I? Why can't I see?" Panic gripped his chest. His breath came out in shallow, ragged gasps. He heard voices, muffled and distant. "He's waking up. Eric, baby, Mommy's here. Try to stay calm, sweetheart." Then the doctor's voice, clinical, certain, too calm. There was trauma to the head, significant damage to the optic nerve. "I'm afraid," the rest blurred. Eric felt himself float in and out of pain, fear, and denial. He couldn't cry. He couldn't scream. The tears wouldn't fall. The sob wouldn't come, just silence. Heavy, crushing. Kennedy Gabriel walked away from the accident itself. Eric refused to speak. He didn't eat much. He flinched when people entered the room without announcing themselves. He stopped answering Michael's texts. He shut the world out, piece by piece, until only the sound of his mother's voice reached him through the haze. Sandra never stopped coming. She brushed his hair when he let her. She helped him dress when he was too tired. She made jokes, even when her own eyes were red from crying. She held it together for him. "You're still here," she whispered one night, holding his hand as he lay silent. "You're still my boy. I still see you." Michael, the stubborn idiot that he was, didn't stop showing up either. "Dude, you're not going blind and ghosting me. That's not how this works." He brought stories. Dumb stories. Embarrassing ones. The kind that made Eric smirk in spite of himself. And one day, Michael said, "I want you to meet someone." Eric frowned. "Why?" "Because she asked about you. She's different." "I'm not looking for different," Eric muttered. "Yeah, well, sometimes different finds you anyway." Her name was Sophia. Eric heard it before he ever met her, softly spoken through Michael's laughter, as if the very syllables carried something sacred. There was a lilt in Michael's voice whenever he mentioned her, like her name came with sunlight. "She's different, man. Like, in a good way," Michael had said one warm afternoon, their usual spot under the maple tree filled with the sound of wind and birds and the subtle hum of Eric's assistive device reading out a book. Eric chuckled. "You say that about every girl you want me to meet." "No, I don't," Michael argued. "I said Megan was smart. I said Ava was cute. But Sophia's got a heart." Eric leaned his head back against the tree trunk, letting the filtered sun wash over his face. His world had long gone dark, but there were still moments that felt like light. Michael was one of them. "She knows I'm blind?" Eric asked, not really expecting much. "Yeah," Michael replied. "She didn't flinch, asked if you read Braille or used tech. Said she'd love to meet you, but only if you're okay with it." Eric smiled at that. There was something refreshing about someone who asked to meet him, not to see him. A week later, she walked into his life like she belonged there. She didn't announce herself, didn't try to pity him. She just sat beside him in Michael's living room and said, "You don't look like a guy who lets life win." Eric turned toward the voice. Her voice, warm, software, confident in a way that didn't demand attention, it simply earned it. "And you sound like someone who knows how to make an entrance," he replied, lips curling. She laughed, the kind of laugh that made you want to say something funny again just to hear it twice. "I'm Sophia." "Eric." They shook hands, and for a moment, that simple contact felt like something bigger. Not magic, not fate, just honest, human connection. The kind Eric hadn't felt in a while. Michael gave them space, said he'd be in the kitchen, but stayed long enough to catch Eric's half smile and Sophia's curious gaze. "You always this calm?" she asked after a beat. "No," Eric said truthfully. "I used to be angry. Then I realized it didn't change anything." Sophia nodded, though he couldn't see it. "That makes sense." He tilted his head. "You're not uncomfortable?" "Should I be?" she asked. Most people hesitated. They looked at his eyes too long or too little. Some tried to overcompensate with cheeriness, others with awkward silence. Sophia did neither. She spoke to him, not at him, and that made all the difference. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, about her studies in art history and his obsession with audiobooks, about how she once got lost in the subway for 3 hours, and how he could still remember the color of his mother's dresses even now. The world faded around them until only their voices filled the space. After that day, she kept showing up, sometimes with cookies, sometimes with questions, about his tech, about how he got around, about what helped and what annoyed him. She never assumed. She asked. And then, one evening, she showed up with a white cane in her hand. Eric raised a brow. "You planning on joining the blind squad?" Sophia grinned. "I'm learning, orientation and mobility training, so I can understand what it's like, so I don't treat you like you're made of glass." Eric didn't say anything at first. Emotion swelled in his chest. too big to name. It wasn't about the cane. It wasn't even about her learning. It was the choice. She chose to meet him where he was, to enter his world without expecting him to cross into hers. From that day on, she wasn't just a girl he liked. She became the hand he reached for in the dark, the voice that could pull him back when he felt himself slipping into old shadows. She knew the layout of his apartment by heart. She learned how to guide him without making it obvious. She asked if the lighting was too bright or too dim, even though he couldn't see it, just so he knew she still considered his comfort. And she made him laugh, really laugh, like life wasn't something to endure, but something to enjoy again. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. And Sophia, she was the reason Eric smiled again. The reason the house didn't feel like a quiet, endless tunnel of darkness anymore. The reason his mother stopped crying behind closed doors and started baking again. Sweet lemon bread, warm chocolate chip cookies, the kind that made the whole house smell like hope. Sophia didn't just walk into his life, she waltzed in, gracefully, boldly, like she'd always known where she belonged. And she decided with quiet certainty that her place was beside him. It started with a knock at the front door on a Tuesday afternoon. Not the kind of knock you forget, light but purposeful, like it came from someone who wasn't afraid of what stood behind it. Michael's voice echoed down the hallway. "Eric, I brought someone." Eric, seated in the living room with his cane resting against the arm of the couch, turned his head slightly. He hated surprises. They always left him feeling like the last one to know the punchline of a joke. The floor creaked. A pair of soft footsteps followed Michael's heavier ones. "Hi," a voice said, calm and clear. "I'm Sophia." That was it. No pity in her tone, no hesitation. Just 5 letters and a smile you could feel in her voice. Eric nodded slowly. "Eric." Sophia didn't sit down right away. She studied him, not like an exhibit or a charity case, but like someone she wanted to understand. Then she sat, close enough to make her presence known, far enough to give him space. Thoughtful. Michael launched into small talk, but Eric only heard pieces of it. He was focused on her, the rhythm of her voice, the way she didn't tiptoe around his blindness like others did. She asked things, honest things. "Do you read Braille? Do you want me to say, 'see you later', or is that weird now? Do you like music? What's your favorite sound?" She wasn't testing him, she was learning him. And by the end of that first conversation, Eric wasn't just curious, he was captivated. Sophia kept coming back, sometimes with Michael, sometimes alone. She brought laughter, stories, little moments of sunshine. Eric, who had learned to count his days in heartbeats and careful steps, began counting them in visits. Mondays smelled like the jasmine perfume she wore. Fridays meant caramel lattes with extra whipped cream and arguments over whether or not pineapple belonged on pizza. But Sophia did something no one else had done. She entered his world. One evening, Eric heard her footsteps approach with a new rhythm. Hesitant, uneven. She stumbled into the room with a stick tapping in front of her. "What are you doing?" he laughed, puzzled. "I'm trying to learn," she said, grinning. "You navigate like a superhero, and I tripped over a coffee table. Teach me." She bought a white cane and asked him to show her how he walked through his house. She wore a blindfold one day, bumped into a wall and burst out laughing. Okay, that was humbling. She learned the apps he used, read books on blindness, followed blind creators on social media. Not because she wanted to feel good about herself, but because she wanted to meet him where he was. Understand what comfort looked like in his world. One night, as they sat outside on the porch, listening to cicadas hum in the warm summer air, Eric spoke. "You don't have to do all this, you know." Sophia turned to him. "Do what?" "All of this, learning, changing how you move. You don't have to understand everything about blindness to be here." She was quiet for a moment. Then she whispered, "I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because I love you." Eric didn't respond right away. His breath caught in his chest. For a boy who had lost so much in one day, this moment felt like a quiet miracle, a new chapter, one he never thought he'd get to write. And in that silence, with nothing but crickets and starlight between them, he whispered back, "Then stay." She reached for his hand. "Always." Back inside, Sandra Gabriel watched from the window. A soft smile pulled at her lips. Her son was laughing again. Not a forced chuckle or a polite smile, a real laugh. The kind he used to let out as a boy when she tickled him under the chin or snuck marshmallows into his hot chocolate. And the girl, Sophia, was the reason Eric had done the unthinkable. For months, she had been a steady anchor in his life. Through every dark day, through every sleepless night, she had been there, offering him hope when he thought he couldn't take another step. Her love had always been unwavering, even in the face of his anger, his bitterness, and the weight of his blindness. But it was more than that. It was the idea of seeing her, really seeing her, that made Eric consider something he never thought he would. The surgery. The idea wasn't his. It came from Michael, his best friend. "Eric," Michael had said, sitting beside him one late evening, the sound of their quiet conversation barely reaching the corners of the darkened room. "You need to consider this. I know you're scared, but you could see again. Just imagine being able to see Sophia, to see her smile, the way she looks at you, to really see the world." Eric had been silent for a long time, staring out the window into the night. He wasn't sure what to feel. He had accepted his blindness, even found a way to live with it. But Michael's words made him wonder, could it really happen? Could he really see again? "I know the risks," Michael continued, his voice steady. "But this surgery, it could give you a few minutes, hours, maybe even a few days of vision. It's a chance, Eric, a chance." It sounded so simple when Michael said it, but for Eric, the idea of seeing again was overwhelming. "I've heard of it," Eric said quietly, his voice filled with hesitation. "But it's experimental. What if it doesn't work? What if I end up worse than I was?" Michael leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "What if it does work, though? What if you wake up and see Sophia, see everything you've missed? Isn't that worth the risk?" Eric's heart raced at the thought. Sophia. He could see her. Her face. The way she lit up when she laughed. The way her eyes shone when she spoke. He had spent so many years imagining what she looked like, filling in the blanks in his mind. But he couldn't remember the last time he had truly seen her face. "I don't know if I can," Eric murmured, his voice breaking through the uncertainty. "What if I can't handle it? What if I get a glimpse of her, and then it's all taken away?" Michael reached out, placing a hand on Eric's shoulder. "Then you've had that moment, haven't you? Even if it's just a few seconds, you've seen her, and no one can take that away." Eric sat back, the weight of the decision settling on him. Michael was right. He didn't have to live in the unknown forever. He could take a chance to see the woman who had given him so much. He closed his eyes and thought about Sophia. The thought of seeing her face, truly seeing her, made his chest tighten. It was everything he wanted, everything he needed. The fear still lingered, but it was drowned out by the pull of hope. After a long moment, Eric nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The decision was made, the surgery was scheduled, and the countdown to the procedure felt like an eternity. Each day leading up to it, Eric's mind swirled with conflicting emotions. Fear, excitement, and the overwhelming sense that this was a gamble. But he was ready to take it, ready to see her. Sophia, ever the rock in his life, stayed by his side as the day approached. She kept quiet about the surgery, knowing how difficult it was for Eric to grapple with. But she was there, always there, offering him quiet strength when he needed it most. The day of the surgery arrived. Eric sat in the sterile room, the coldness of the metal chair beneath him, stark against his skin. He could feel the anxiety creeping in again, but this time, he didn't fight it. He had chosen this path, and now there was no turning back. The surgeon came in, followed by the assistant who would monitor him during the procedure. Eric looked at them with a calmness that surprised him, his mind oddly clear despite the whirlwind of thoughts that raged inside. "You ready?" the surgeon asked, his tone reassuring. Eric nodded, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak. "Ready." As the team prepped him for the procedure, the finality of it all settled in. This was his chance, his only chance. And then, as the anesthesia took hold, everything went dark. When Eric woke, the world was still a blur. The bandages were thick over his eyes, and for the first time since the surgery, he felt a wave of panic rise within him. Did it work? He wasn't sure. It had been hours, longer than he expected, but he could feel something changing inside him. The cold, sterile air around him, the faint murmur of voices. He knew he wasn't alone. Sophia was there, sitting by his side, just as she had promised. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice soft and warm. Eric swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I don't know yet. I don't feel anything." The hours passed slowly as Eric rested. His mind kept wandering to the thought of Sophia. He imagined her waiting there, just beyond his reach. Will I see her? Sophia stayed close, her hand in his, talking to him in soft whispers, filling the silence with words of comfort. She had always been so patient with him. Even now, as the uncertainty of the surgery loomed, she never once showed a flicker of doubt. And then, the moment finally came. The bandages were removed piece by piece. The world around him felt strangely distant at first, as if he were drifting in and out of a dream. But then, the light, the sharpness of the day, the colors, the shapes. Eric blinked several times, his heart racing as his eyes adjusted to the light. There, standing before him, was the woman he loved, Sophia. She was perfect, more beautiful than he had imagined, even though he had never seen her before. He could see the outline of her face, the softness in her smile, the way her hair framed her face. His heart swelled in his chest, and for a few precious moments he didn't want to blink, didn't want to close his eyes. He just wanted to take in every detail, every moment. He reached out, his fingers brushing the skin of her cheek. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice shaky. "I can see you." Tears welled in her eyes and she smiled. "And I see you, Eric." But, as with all things fragile, the vision didn't last. The world around him began to blur once again, the edges softening as his vision faded. The clarity that had filled his world just moments before was slipping away, like sand through his fingers. Sophia held his hand tightly, but Eric could feel the reality of the situation. The sight was temporary. He had known it would be. But what he had seen, the glimpse of her face, the chance to look into her eyes, was enough. The vision faded, but the love remained.